Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch off your microphones when you're not speaking. Thank you. So my name is Councillor Rex Walker. I'm the chair of the committee. To my left, Councillor Andy Edivine, the vice chair, and the officers with us this evening, Andrew Cullen, planning manager, Peter Langton, area planning officer, Gareth Elliott, area planning officer, and Rachel Clack, borough solicitor. So let's get down to business. And the first item is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Thomas, who's been substituted by Councillor Way, Councillor Chaplin, who has been substituted by Councillor Plant, and Councillor Brown, who has been substituted by Councillor Matthews for this meeting. And also note that Councillor Sue Mallender is yet to arrive. Thank you.
Thank you. And declarations of interest. I'll start by saying that that it falls to me to advise the committee that a written statement from Councillor Grocock for application 2401451 Sutton cum Granby was sent to members of the committee prior to the meeting, and similarly written representations were received from Councillor Perek regarding 2402130, again by email prior to the meeting. Are there any other declarations of interest? Very good. So the minutes of the last meeting, and just to clarify, I appreciate that two sets of minutes were produced in the agenda, but we're thinking we'd already signed off the ones from the prior meeting, so we're just talking about the meeting held on the 26th of June. Are we happy that they're an accurate record of the meeting? All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. So we'll sign those as an accurate record. Very good. So let's get down to what we've really come for, which is the two planning applications that we'll be considering tonight. The first of which deals with a land fronting Roseway and Melton Road, Ed Walton. And first I'll hand over to Mr. Langton, who's going to take us through the report, or perhaps if he waits a few seconds. We haven't started the item yet, have we? So Councillor Mallender, we're just about to start, so I think you timed it. I think you're over here. Okay. Just while we're getting ourselves sorted out, Councillor Mann will just check whether you have any declarations of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've got a few late items to report to the committee this evening. There's been an update to the draft heads of terms from that set out in the report, and that's to set out in the heads of terms tables that there's the inclusion of the requirement for the accommodation to be age restricted to over 55s only. That's just for the avoidance of doubt and to tie the development in with what has been applied for. An additional conditions also been proposed, which is that prior to development being brought into use, a car park management plan shall be submitted to and agreed in writing by the local planning authority, and the site shall thereafter be managed in accordance with the approved management plan. So that's in the event that planning approval is granted in line with the recommendation. It's recommended that that's included as well. There's a correction to the officer report, which is there's a wording error in paragraph 40 of the report. the word "be" should be moved to within the sentence, so that the sentence should read: "The revised proposal does not include a care element, nor would any staff be employed at the site, both aspects of which generate parking demand." There's also a late item in the form of an objection from a member of the public who make a query regarding the land use category referred to in the transport statements. And that's set out in there. There's also a verbal update regarding the sentence that I just mentioned on the late item, and that's that where paragraph 40 references no staff being employed at the site, there would actually, we understand there would be one member of staff that would be employed at the site as a warden, so they'd be at the site full time. So that's all the late items. In respect of the planning application, the application is for an 80 apartment age restricted apartment block for over 55s. Development has commenced on the site in accordance with a previously approved scheme for a residential care home, so that's underway as we at the moment. The application site is located to the west of Melton Road and to the south of Rose Way, falling within the part of the wider strategic allocation. Access to the site is taken from the existing roundabout junction, so that's just down there on the screen. So yeah, and then there's a further aerial view there for context. So you see that's the wider strategic allocation. You may know that's the Porsche car showroom to the south of it, and obviously the ring road further south and the roundabout. So there's a photo you can see, as I've just referenced, building work is currently ongoing in line with the previously approved scheme, and that's a picture of the northern elevation of the building taken from Melton Road. That's a photograph taken from the main access road off the smaller roundabout within the site, looking again to the northern elevation. Photograph taken again from that same spot, looking towards the east. You see the residential development to the left of the photograph there, which is situated to the north of the site. Again, looking at that roundabout from the access road, looking north towards the existing dwellings. And again, from the same spot, just looking slightly more northeasterly. Photograph taken from the west, from the east side of Melton Road, sorry, looking west towards the ongoing development. So in terms of the proposal, the design is virtually identical to what was previously approved as the care home. There's limited alterations to the ground floor fenestration to account for internal layout alterations, but in terms of the scale, the height and the layout of the building, this is virtually identical to what was previously approved on the scheme. Internal alterations are proposed, including the reduction in communal space. You'll see there's still some communal space proposed internally there, but it's a reduction from the previously approved care home. There's also been an internal alteration to accommodate 3 additional apartments when compared to the previously approved scheme. So the proposal includes 48 car parking spaces located to the south and to the west of the development. There's an increase of 2 spaces from the previously approved scheme. In terms of the development itself and the principle of development, given the previous approval for the residential care home on the site, the principle of residential development on the site is considered acceptable. As there is no change to the overall scale or layout of the building, notwithstanding minor amendments to the fenestration, there are no concerns are raised in terms of impact on street scene or the character of the area, or in the impact of the amenity of nearby residents in respect of overlooking, overshadowing, and overbearing impacts, that kind of thing. So the main matters for consideration, therefore, as set out in the report, do relate to parking and highway safety, which has seen a shift from the previous position of the approved scheme. In respect of this, the Highway Authority did initially raise concerns in respect of the application, noting that the parking proposed would represent an under-provision when compared to the requirements as set out in the Nottinghamshire County Council Highway Design Guide. The applicant subsequently provided a transport technical note to the Highway Authority to justify the shortfall in parking. Within this, it's set out that the proposal would provide parking for 60% of the units within the scheme, which compared as per their notes to an average provision of 30% provision across similar schemes run by the applicant. It's also set out within the note that on average 29% of residents within their existing schemes own a car, which when tabled against the proposed development would be a demand of around 23 vehicles. On review of this note, the Highway Authority accepted the proportion of parking would be higher compared to similar developments from the applicant, although they did acknowledge that the location is less central when compared to the comparables. However, the Highway Authority does note that the site benefits from a frequent bus route into West Bridgford and then on to Nottingham City Centre, and also is in close proximity to a recently developed retail park, which offers a number of facilities which can be accessed by residents within the scheme and therefore should lessen the need for vehicle ownership. Taking these matters into account, the Highway Authority has not raised any objection to the scheme, and therefore no concerns are raised in respect of parking or highway safety to this application. Other matters for note, the application would be subject to a Section 106 agreement should planning permission be granted. Heads of terms for this have been agreed and are set out within the report. The highlights being that it would be for over 55s only. The scheme would be an affordable market scheme, with it being 100% social rented units. There's a requirement for NHS contributions as well as allotment contributions as well. Taking these matters into account, it's considered that the proposal represents an acceptable form of development, and it's recommended that planning permission is granted in accordance with the details set out on pages 21 to 30 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 3 speakers registered to address us this evening. The first is Mr. Henderson, the applicant's agent. So I invite you to come up there and make yourself comfortable. I think you'd have had the brief. When you're ready, press the button on to the right of the phone. It should flash up red. When you're ready to go, we'll start timing you 5 minutes, and with 30 seconds to go, we'll give you a nudge and let you know that there's 30 seconds left.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman and members. I'm Rob Henderson. I'm the agent for the applicant, and we're very grateful that we have the opportunity to address you this evening. The applicant is Anchor. Anchor is building and will operate this development. Anchor is the UK's biggest specialist provider of affordable homes for older people. It's a charitable community benefit society. It houses 65,000 residents in 5,500 locations across the UK. The average age of an Anchor resident is 82, and my mum lives in an Anchor flat, and it's wonderful. I'm a huge fan of the Anchor product, and I love the opportunity to come and talk to planning committees about it. If you've got any questions and you're able to, please do ask me. As you'll be aware, this site is already in the process of being developed. Peter described what's being built as a care home, but that's not quite right. What's actually being constructed is essentially the same thing that we're applying for now, albeit that the flats, the 77 apartments that are within the building, as has been approved, were described as what's called assisted living apartments. Now, what we're proposing now is exactly the same apartments, but what's changed is that some of the support facilities within the ground floor of the building have been reduced, and 3 more apartments accommodated at ground floor level. The reason for that is because assisted living in planning terms is a Class C2 development, which is a very specific product which has to be supported by the county council in its social care function. And after work had already begun on this, the county council established that it wasn't able to support or fund that. And therefore, the reason you have an application before you now is because Anchor has just had to slightly adjust the housing model that it's seeking to bring forward, and that now trips into what we call Class C3, and that's specifically because, albeit many of our residents will be in receipt of care in their homes, that care will be provided in the county council's preferred approach, which is by an external provider coming in rather than by staff who are permanently based on this site. It's a subtle change, but that's the reason why we've had to reapply for planning permission. What's worth really bearing in mind about the permission that is being built out is it was 77 apartments. There is no minimum age restriction in the scheme as approved. There's no affordable housing obligation applicable to the scheme that was approved. And there's no obligation in the planning permission to provide any external community access or function, albeit Anchor did say, and still intends to, encourage the community to participate in activities that its residents undertake within the premises. The key attribute of the approved C2 assisted living scheme was the provision and availability of care services within and integral to the function of the property. But as I've said, it's not possible to provide that in accordance with the County Council's social care function. So that's why we had to reapply. The other subtle changes are we've got 3 additional apartments within the building and a reduced communal space. We've got 2 additional car parking spaces, and there's a couple of minor changes to some of the windows at ground floor level. Otherwise, it's essentially the same building, same size, same appearance, same development. In the new scheme, all of the flats will be social housing. They'll be socially rented affordable homes that will be let to tenants that are nominated by this council. The homes will only be available to tenants that are over the age of 55 and in reality will be significantly older. And the homes will enable under-occupied family homes in the social housing sector to be freed up. So that's a real benefit to providing specialist affordable housing for older people. I'm very aware that the key concern of people sitting behind me and that we've seen in the representations that have been received is car parking. Now, as I say, Anchor has 5,500 different properties across the UK, and I've worked on a number of them. There are 5 that we've identified within a couple of miles of this site, and those were the ones that were identified in the transport information that was submitted to the County Council and to your officers. And in each of those cases, 23% of residents, 23% of the households had access to a car, and 30%. And so the demand for parking, taking account of staffing and residential demand in those schemes, was about 30%.
30 seconds.
Thanks. This is essentially the same product we are seeking to bring forward here. The parking provision here will be double what we think we actually need, and therefore we are absolutely confident and have provided evidence that has satisfied your highway authority that there will not be parking displacement in this situation. And I just want you to be very aware that that is the information that we have provided. Listen, thank you so much for your time. There's so much more I could say, but if you have got any questions, I have a colleague from Anchor in the room, and I just want to, say your officers have got this right, and I hope you can support them. Many thanks.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Khan, who's going to speak on behalf of the objectors. Mr. Khan, while you're making yourself comfortable, I think you've seen the drill there. Mr. Cullinan has presentation. Are you? Yeah. Do you want to let us know next slide, Chris? Yeah, okay. What was his name? Chris Whitty style, but we don't. Okay, so when you're ready, it's the right-hand button, away you go, and okay. When you're in your own time.
Good evening. My name's Sufyan, and I am one of the residents. I actually live at 52 Rose Way, and I'm here to voice some of the concerns and objections I found from my research. So I've got 3 children, ages 1 to 6, so you can imagine how my life is currently. And I just want to give a bit of my experience on Rose Way and how I think this application is going to impact it. So it's an incredible neighbourhood. We've got really vibrant young families, elderly, retired, you name it, it's there. I think it's been a real testament to the planning department and builders to get to the place where it is today. And to be honest, with the wide range of backgrounds and the sense of community, I think there's a general feel we would love to expand the facility and the neighbourhood to the over 55s. But I feel the question still remains at this point, which is, has Anchor really appreciated the full local issues of parking today? And I wouldn't blame them for not, because they don't live here. So there's 3 points I'd really like to run through here, which was really the safety of the children, mine included, just some of my interpretations of the Anchor car parking models and reviewing some of their sites today. So the safety of the children aspect. So from personal experience, and I see this every single day, Well, even if there's one car parked on Rose Way, as soon as there's a school run, we'll always end up seeing cars queuing and a lot of issues on that road. And that's just with one car. All it's going to take is for one child to run out from behind a car and get hit at 20 or 30 miles per hour because no one, unfortunately, does 20 down that road. And then suddenly we can start to think about, should really people be parking on the road? So there's a bit of a child safety aspect here. And I think this happens for a lot of other people. It's a very family orientated area. My neighbour's got one on the way and a 15-month-old. I've got 3. So it's something that's close to our heart. Now, I'm a bit boring like this, but I took a bit of a dip into Anchor's proposal, and I took some individual analysis using the DCLG and the car parking research for Nottinghamshire. And the calculations I've come to show that Anchor have under-provisioned by about 10 places, and I can come to this in a bit. Now, Mr. Henderson did a really, really good job explaining C2 versus C3, but I feel this wasn't 100% there. When he says it was essentially the same thing, but different. A C3 is the same as your house and my house, a small flat. A C2 is a residential care home or a boarding college with care facilities. And they're two very different things. So to say it's essentially the same thing, my house is a C3. Nothing doesn't look like this. The car parking ownership levels, I got the Rushcliffe numbers for them, and I'm getting 42% for 1-bed flats and 49% for the 2-bed flats, including the social housing element. So I'm not seeing this stack up with some of Anchor's numbers. A number of car trips in the 50 to 59 bracket and the 60 to 69 bracket are actually the same as the 50 to 59 bracket. So they're not going to be taking less car trips either. So again, I've been starting to try and question, and this is the Rushcliffe Borough data and the council data. This data here is from the NHBC, and this is actually car parking. And they did a survey on age-restricted properties, and 2/3 of the complaints were around car parking and not sufficient car parking. Again, we're told that there's enough, yet 2/3 of residents say there isn't. NHBC, and this is an independent survey. So this is just the basics of my analysis of kind of where I've tried to work it out. And I don't think Anchor have fully accounted for the additional visitor demand, according to the DCLG and the car parking research for Nottinghamshire, or even taking into account the car ownership levels. One of the last points is, and I'll come to this in a bit. I've always spoken through that. One of the last points is reviewing some of the Anchor sites today. I feel like this data has been cherry picked. We're told within a few miles they've chosen 3 or 4 relevant properties, but there's about 8 or so in Nottingham, a similar amount in Derby, and I took some satellite photos and I visited them, and they seem to be very different. So as an example, Miriam Court was full when I went there, and the only thing stopping car parking was just a sign that says private car park, which, by the way, is not legally enforceable. Peveril Court, which is one of the ones quoted, full. I couldn't get that. There's only 1 space, I think. If you look at this satellite photo, this is Runnymede Court in Nottingham, almost full. St James Court as well. Lorman Gardens, the car park's full and you've got loads of cars parked on the outside. Chester Court, you've got 2 cars parked illegally. Normanton Lodge, full.
Mr. Khan, that's your 5 minutes. I'll ask you to wrap up, please.
It was more of the same.
Okay.
But essentially, thank you all for your time.
Thank you. And finally, we have Councillor Parek, Ward Councillor.
Over 55s don't drive, and therefore this application proposes only 48 parking spaces for 80 dwellings with 129 bedrooms for approximately 258 residents. But let's be realistic, councillors. How many of you are over 55 and how many of you will say you don't need a car? Because according to our applicant, you are old, not according to me, and they expect you to follow a retired lifestyle and use only public transport. National data shows that over 80% of households aged 60 to 74 own at least one vehicle, and nearly half own two. These figures are rising, not falling. In my view, the applicant submitted a flawed TTN containing only cherry-picked data from a few of their sites and limited real-world evidence. And yet somehow County Highways accepted it at face value, withdrawing their original objection without requesting any independent traffic modelling or on-the-ground assessment. How can the data in this TTN be trusted? The developer in this case is Anchor, and the track record should raise red flags for this committee. As of June 2025, Anchor has been formally downgraded by the regulator of social housing to G3 for governance and C3 for consumer standards. The statement from the national regulator says that Anchor cannot demonstrate that it has effective systems in place to manage risk or report accurate data. So I ask you plainly, if a housing provider is deemed not to fit to manage basic compliance data, why should this committee or the county council place confidence in the TTN and assumptions that have been submitted? And let's remember, this is not a town centre site like Peveril Court in West Bridgford. Edwalton has limited nearby services, nor joined up public infrastructure. Expecting future residents to live car-free here is not just unrealistic, it's poor planning and contradicts the lived experiences of local people. How do you expect over 55s to travel in a sustainable and efficient manner to Queen's or city hospitals without no direct transport links? How do you expect them to travel to Morrison's or Asda, which are nearby supermarkets, without no direct public transport links from the Edwalton site? Or is our applicant assuming that over 55s should just have the choice of one supermarket, and as they live in affordable homes, that's all that they deserve? The likely result of this site being approved is excessive on-site parking pressure, spillover onto Roseway, Wells Road, Sunflower Drive and Melton Road, and real risk to highway safety, contrary to policy TRA3 and NPPF paragraph 112, which requires developments to ensure safe, accessible and sustainable transport options. The scheme has intensified from 77 to 80 units. This is textbook overdevelopment, squeezing too much into a constrained site and also reducing the communal space and facilities which was promised to residents, including having mobile hair salons, nail bars, etc. The new proposal doesn't offer any chances of the local community integrating with the residents by reducing the communal space which was promised and sold to the residents as part of the previous C2 application. The shift from C2 is a fundamental change in how this site functions. More vehicles, more trips, greater pressure on refuse maintenance and local healthcare facilities, and a complete loss of the on-site care provision that previously justified reduced infrastructure. Yet this material change has not been re-evaluated in this documentation, and the community has not been properly consulted. A claim of 167% BNG is meaningless without a credible delivery and monitoring plan, legal enforcement mechanisms, a 30-year habitat management agreement, and provisions for off-site compensation if targets are missed. At present, the proposal offers none of this, rendering the BNG speculative and insufficient under NPPF 180. However, if the committee is still minded to approve this application, I urge the committee to require the following non-negotiable conditions. Double yellow lines at Roseway, Wells Road, Sunflower Drive, Melton Road junctions to prevent overspill. Age restriction 60+ for residents, 55+ for partners or carers. Car ownership controls, pre-tenancy screening, on-site vehicle register, annual reporting to the council, tenancy clauses discouraging high vehicle usage, parking permit exclusion. If yellow lines aren't delivered, the site must be excluded from any controlled parking zone. Biodiversity conditions, full biodiversity delivery plan secured via 106, on-site habitat creation, 30-year management and monitoring, off-site compensation if targets are not achieved, and construction of only 77 flats as per the original application as opposed to 80. In summary, this proposal is built on unrealistic assumptions, flawed data, unsupported claims about transport and ecology. It relies on the developer Anchor, who has been formally downgraded for failing to manage risk governance and compliance data that matters. The scheme underestimates traffic, overstates connectivity, and disregards the lived experience of the residents in Edwalton. I urge the committee to refuse this application if approved, apply firm and enforceable conditions to protect the community from the consequences of poor planning. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mr. Langton, do you have any points of clarification arising from the speakers?
I think probably just one at the end, because obviously I suspect we'll get questions during the day. We're happy to come back on those, but just with regards to the BNG, there is a condition on the proposed condition 21 on the report that requires a habitat maintenance management plan to secure the BNG that has been set out in the application. But no, happy to deal with questions as they arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so it falls to us now to deliberate, discuss, debate. Who'd like to start us off? Yeah, so Councillor Ellis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know what the correct number of parking spaces is, but it's quite clearly a matter of great concern to the community. And if I recall correctly, the number of the average of 29 car parking spaces or whatever it was based on a very elderly population within these particular sites. Now that we've got this as an over 55 residential park, over 55s, wasn't it said that 50 is the new 40? So 55 would be 55 would be the new 45, and people of that age and health and vitality will want cars. The national statistic for car ownership, I think somebody mentioned that before, was actually just under 80% of households in the UK have one or more cars, and we all know of some dwellings where there are 2, 3, 4 cars. It's not directly relevant to this particular situation, but my gut feel is that Edwalton residents are right to be fearful of this under provision of parking. Now, I had a look at the layout, because I thought that surely there must be a way of increasing the number of parking spaces, but actually there's no obvious way of doing it without actually reducing some of the public spaces or the number of dwellings. And if you reduce the number of dwellings, does that make the project unviable? So it's a bit of a tricky equation, but I'm not happy with the application as it stands. And my personal feeling, members may not agree, is that rather than approve or reject, we ought to defer this application and let officers discuss with the applicant the possibilities of getting the parking up to a reasonable level and still leaving the project as a viable one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would defer to Councillor Birch next, please. Thank you. On the topic of parking then.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Ellis. I've got concerns about the levels of parking here. We've obviously changed this to an over 55s setup, and the gentleman from the applicants used the phrase, in reality, they'll be significantly older. That's an assumption. We've got to base our decision here based on that these people are younger. We cannot assume that they will just be older. We cannot take that for granted. Both of my grandparents lived in over 55s accommodation. One's still alive, bless her. So I'm very familiar with the realities. And the realities is there is high car ownership. I know this is anecdotal, but there's high car ownership. You've got carers, you've got family visiting. It's not just the actual residents themselves. There needs to be capacity for visitors. I have particular concern about the traffic notes. The way it reads, and perhaps officers can give some clarity on this, the way it reads is that Anchor supplied the data themselves. I'm reading that as that is unverified data. Anchor has just supplied that, and we're taking that as face value from them. Can we just confirm that, please?
Yes, that's correct. It was submitted by the by the agent on behalf of the applicant, reviewed by the Highway Authority, who then provided their final comments.
So I'm not happy to take that on face value, because obviously it's in Anchor's interest to provide data that is in their favour. I'm not saying they've done that, but how can we, or how can the Highways Authority just take that at face value? I don't understand that, to be quite honest. You would have thought any council worth its salt would have got some independent data there, but there doesn't appear to be any. So I share Councillor Ellis's concerns. Obviously, there is huge resident backlash against it, and I think that needs to be considered as well. And I'm very concerned. So I'm interested to see how the discussion goes on, and if we are going to add conditions or reject it outright. I'm undecided at this point, but as I say, I'm really very concerned.
Thank you. Councillor Wells, please.
Thank you, Chair. I went and visited the site, as I normally do. There's going to be a retail park, as you can, all the councillors can see. The road leading to this development isn't that big. So where are the guests, the relatives going to park when they go and see the older generation, their mother and father, or their uncle? And I don't believe there's enough parking at all for this being affair. I know it's not in the plan, but I think the builders should have put an underground car park where the main car park is well. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I go to Councillor Matthews, as pleasant as it is to receive a round of applause from one of my comments, I think I'll just ask people to, particularly while councillors are speaking, to resist the temptation, whether you be in favour of what they're saying or indeed against, just to allow our debate to continue as it should, please. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. I also have a few concerns and a question, if I may, around the parking. Knowing that area and the whole of that estate, the roads are actually built deliberately narrower. And so it really sort of struck a chord when the residents were saying about the width and the concern when cars are then parked on that for safety, etc. So I don't think that's necessarily been taken into account, because if anything does have to park outside of the car parks, it's going to cause chaos, knowing that location. In the additional item, it mentions having a car park management plan. But there's no details of what that is or how that is going to be monitored, or what it will mean for the residents and visitors, etc. Are you able to expand on what exactly that proposal is, please, for us?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So car park management plan is typically it's added on by way of conditions. So the applicants, usually prior to, I think it was prior to first use of the development, would have to set out how they envisage their car park being used. I know it sets out within the application that generally anchor developments operate unallocated spaces for residents and visitors, but it would just confirm if that would be the process. Details of, yeah, if they were to be allocated, how that would go forth, and if residents weren't able to park in there, what the alternative options would be for those residents or prospective residents. And yeah, that would be submitted as a formal document to ourselves, and we would then either approve that document or refuse it, and until we have a satisfactory document, then that condition would remain undischarged, and the development can come into use.
Thank you. So you haven't seen sight of what the proposals are at this stage? Is that correct?
No, that's why it's conditioned.
Thank you.
Councillor plant, please.
Wasn't ready for that. Yes, thank you, Chair. I think, well, I feel quite sort of mixed feelings about this application, because I certainly feel that there is a need for more affordable and social housing in Rushcliffe. And, you know, well, that is without a doubt. But certainly the change from this from C2 to C3 will undoubtedly increase the parking in terms of the original application. And I can understand residents' concerns about that. I don't think the comparing the other anchor applications is very helpful, because we don't know enough detail. One of the residents did fill in a bit of detail about the differences of where these other schemes were. So I don't think that was particularly helpful. And without a doubt, Rushcliffe is a very affluent area, and we do probably have more car ownership than than many of the other boroughs. And 55, to be honest, to me is like a spring chicken. I mean, I'm sorry, that is no age. And again, the agent has said that, you know, the average age actually within the scheme will be 80. I don't know how you can work that out at all. But again, if that is the case, I have more concerns about the people, the actual residents of this scheme, because, and I don't want to be rude to residents here, but, you know, that area is a bit of a, what can I call it? It's a bit of a social desert in terms of infrastructure, and particularly for the elderly. And I do think, to be fair, you've been sold short on that, because there just simply isn't what there should be there to support the community. And, you know, yes, we do, it does have a good bus link, but none of them are direct. And, you know, there is no, there is a supermarket, there is a garden centre, there is a few sandwich shops or a coffee shop or whatever, but that's a good hike for an 80-year-old walking, I can tell you. And it's not a particularly nice walk either on that main road. But there is no doctor, there is no dentist, there is no hairdressers, there is no pub, there is no restaurant, there is nothing there really for that age group. And I'm just wondering whether this is actually being put in the wrong place, or perhaps it's being put in the wrong place at the wrong time, because that infrastructure needs to be there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my first concern is with the table which Anchor provided, with showing the amount of car parking at some of their other sites, and the heading is comparable Anchor independent living schemes, and I just want to know how comparable, say, these examples are with what the developments being proposed, because there is a massive difference in terms of what's being provided. I think it's almost twice as much parking compared with the average of these examples, which seems very strange. Just want to make two other comments. One is about the bus service that's being provided. I did read in some of the literature that it wasn't a particularly frequent bus service, but my understanding, looking at the timetable, is it's incredibly good service. Service number 7, I think it was 28 buses a day each way on number 7, and it gives you access to Melton Road shops, to Central Avenue, and to the city. So an excellent service from what is one of the top bus companies in the country. The other point is the whole issue of wanting more car parking will obviously lead to a lot more travel from site to where other people are driving to, and thus that'll be more traffic at that particular junction, and maybe within the estate itself. So we should take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
It's clear that parking, it seemed clear that parking was going to be the key issue for us to consider, particularly given the Highways Authority as the technical consultee's original objection, which is then satisfied by the data. I think ultimately we find ourselves in a position, don't we, where as we're being asked to do, or as the speakers have suggested that we do, to refuse the application on the basis of, and I think I'll ask officers to confirm the test, but I understand it to be, you know, unacceptable impact on the road network and parking. And feelings are certainly strong. I think the question for me is, have we got the data or the evidence, the factual basis to stand that up?
Thank you, Chair. So obviously, after listening to quite a lot of the debate there, I just wanted to pick up on a few points, specifically around this transport technical note that's been discussed quite a lot. Picking up on your point, Councillor Calvert, about being comparable, and it is in relation to similar schemes that they run. The agent said that they have the same sort of model, and it's exactly the same across all of their sort of other developments. And the information that's been submitted does include one of the schemes which is within the Rushcliffe area as well. So it is comparable to sort of a scheme specifically within Rushcliffe. The outcomes of that data, as I'm sure you're aware and is specified in the report, equates to around 30% on average for parking to dwelling ratio. What's being proposed here is 60%. So it's double what's on average across the rest of their development sites that they have within the immediate area. So I think it's just worth highlighting that. Similarly, the data that's been provided is the same with sort of any other aspects of planning application data supporting information that we receive. When we receive it, we seek the advice of the technical consultees. I think Councillor Walker's just mentioned that County Highways, they initially objected to the scheme. They then received this information, assessed it, and considered that the scheme wouldn't have an adverse impact upon sort of the highway safety implications. If members obviously do consider that the scheme would, I think the question for me would be sort of what, I suppose, what evidence do members have, or why would members be going down that route? Or alternatively, if members aren't satisfied with the information, then it could also be a sort of a failing to demonstrate that sufficient information has been provided to overcome concerns around highway safety. And that's just picked up on a point there from Councillor Walker, just in terms of sort of the tests. So I suppose it's kind of twofold. The only other thing I'd say was the scheme as it's presented is presented here. They've increased the number of parking spaces from the previous application. And I think I'll just reiterate that the Highways Authority have reviewed the application and they don't raise any objection on highway safety grounds.
Councillor Birch.
Thank you, and thank you, Andrew, for that. I understand that the Highways Authority have okayed this. The point I'm making is, and what we've ascertained tonight, is that the data has been submitted by the applicant. I think that's flawed, and I cannot in good conscience take that on face value. Unless it's been provided by an independent entity, how can anybody take that as the data? I'm still not getting that. It's marking your own homework. So that's where I'm at. I don't know how other people feel. I think it's flawed that the Highways Authority has just taken the applicant's biased data on face value without it being independently verified. I have big concerns about that.
Councillor Mason, please.
Thank you. I do have some sympathy about parking, mainly because the rest of West Bridgford is also in a similar position. If you go to anywhere like Lady Bay, some of the roads around West Bridgford, you could say there is not enough parking. And so it is part of this area, really, if you like, that there aren't huge car parks around, and residents have to have special access and tickets and pay. So is this any different from the rest of West Bridgford? Probably not. But I'd have some sympathy with the fact that if you are given access to one of these apartments and they've counted the number of cars that are there, what happens with that when say more than how many car parking spaces, sorry, there are people are there who have already booked a space, if you like, on that car park? What will they say to a new applicant that's coming in with a car, or maybe two applicants, or maybe even more? Do you say you can't park your car, or what would happen to them? Thank you. Well,
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, as with all apartments of that kind, I think there's generally a couple of options for the applicant in that situation, and that's either that they give up car ownership, or they alternatively rent a car parking space elsewhere, or alternatively they don't live there. You know, car parking is a fundamental requirement for them, as is the case with many properties, particularly apartments. If car parking is the most important requirement for them, then it's unlikely that this development would be acceptable, appropriate for them, or that they'd want to live there.
That is what I'm saying about other apartments that are around this area, in the city and anywhere else. They have to accept that they may not be a car parking space for them. To us and to these people here, I'm sure that sounds really, you know, quite awful. I love my car. I feel as though my legs chopped off because I can't park. But they would have to find somewhere else. Now, I don't know how Anchor cope with that in their other places, but I do know that people do like their cars and do like them. And at the age of 55, as I'm 73, I kind of feel I still want my car, so I might need somewhere. Can I continue?
Sorry.
No, I was just waiting for them to finish. Yeah, audience. So I am 73 and I'm still wedded to my car. So I would have thought that in this area that people would need more car parking space than is given, and you would have to turn people down. And that is how it would have to be. So if Anchor are happy at turning people down and not allowing people more than that with cars, so that they're not parking on the roads around the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis, please.
Thank you, Chair. My feeling from the debate that's taken place is that councillors aren't actually opposed to the development itself. I am in favour of it in principle, if we could get rid of the flawed situation of the parking. So I can't think that anyone is going to propose that we accept officers' recommendations. So I think the choice is between rejection or what I suggested earlier, deferment, and a renegotiation by officers with the applicant to find a way of increasing the car parking.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify on the legal position, as this members of this committee well know, you have to determine the applications before you in accordance with the policies in the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In the planning system, there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development if a particular impediment could be remedied by a suitable condition and a Section 106 obligation, then the presumption is that planning permission should be granted, but with that mitigation in place. And there is the Section 106 obligation for the restricting the occupancy in terms of people requiring social rent accommodation for older people. Thank you.
Chair, there is no way that conditions or S106s can achieve the objective that I think we all require. And there is no reason whatsoever why an application cannot be deferred. No reason whatsoever.
There have some colleagues indicating to speak. Councillor Way first, and then Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. I've spent a lot of time looking at this over the last few days, and it occurs to me that there doesn't seem to be any coherent plan for who's going to go into these properties. And I would say there's a huge difference between somebody who's 55 and somebody who's in their mid-80s. People of 55, unless this is only for people who don't work, people of 55 have probably got at least 12 years working time. And not everybody who lives in that area works within the bus route. Somebody's already mentioned places like Morrison's. So there may be people there who actually need their cars for things like that. Having said that, at the other end of the scale, if you've got people who are in their 80s who may be still driving, no reason why they shouldn't, or people who have somebody else living with them who has a disability, within this scheme, we have 4 disabled parking spaces. So you're talking about a population in their average age of 80, which is what the gentleman from the developer said, and you're going to provide 4 disabled spaces. Somewhere in the documents I read that there is a space for parking disability scooters. Now, I couldn't find out where that is on the plan, but if it's a central place, that doesn't seem very sensible for people who need to use disability scooters. So to me, looking at this is a sort of mishmash where they haven't actually understood what their client group is and what their needs might be. I think it's a laudable system, but there are a lot of flaws in it in terms of accessibility. The plan I was looking at earlier, I've picked on apartment 110, which I think is probably in the top right-hand corner. And if somebody there is of limited mobility and their car is parked in space 11, which is at the bottom right left-hand side, that's quite a journey to make between them. Also, if they have to get public transport from apartment 110, it's quite a long walk because the bus stop isn't just out, it is actually just outside where they would be, but they've got to come all the way round. So there's a lot of flaws in this, in establishing what sort of client group this is aimed at. And if it's aimed at people who are fit and young at 55, and dare I say mid-70s, they should be able to have a car. They should be able to get about. And this might well prevent them from doing so. And what happens if somebody moves in at 55 and has a car? When they get to 70 something, are they going to be expected to give up that car so the next lot of 55s can have their car? The whole thing's fraught with issues. And the fact that we have issues with parking elsewhere in West Bridgford shouldn't excuse this from doing something about it. And I'm very much with Councillor Ellis that I think I don't want to turn it down, but on the other hand, I can't accept it as it is. and maybe back to the drawing board with regards parking would be a sensible solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Just going to hear from Mr. Cullen and then Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the deferment that's been mentioned, I'd just like to remind members that it is being built at the moment based on obviously the scheme that they've already got approval for. And I think you can see from the plan that there is probably limited space for additional parking. So I'd probably just sort of caution over going down the deferral route, because it might not necessarily change in anything that comes back to planning committee at a later point, just because it is being built. They've got that fallback position of the building that's being constructed at the moment, and they have increased parking spaces since that approval, obviously as much as they could, by removing some of the landscaping and increasing the parking spaces. Thank you.
I've indicated to Councillor Matthews, but come to you next, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I don't propose to reiterate anything any of the other councillors have said, because I agree with most of it anyway. But if just as a technical issue, what we're being asked to look at here is this amendment. So if we decline this, does that, well, the site would refer to its original planning permission as a care home site. Does that make the developer want to stop doing it? What is, the intention behind the change from their perspective if we don't grant permission this evening based on what we've heard? Are they still planning on carrying on with the care home development as was? And have you got any information about that, please?
Yeah, well, I think if I'd understood correctly, we heard about issues with the model in terms of the county council being previously involved with providing the additional care that was needed to, and then saying they're not in a position to do that anymore. I don't know whether other members had understood that differently, but I think that's what I understood from Mr. Henderson. Do you want to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll just reiterate that this is a full planning application, so it's not an amendment to the original application that was approved, but they would still have that sort of behind them if they wanted to continue with that. That's up to them. It's their next steps for them.
Councillor Mallender, please.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit to being somewhat worried about what reaction I might get, but anyway. I think that a lot of people, certainly in my ward and all over West Bridgford, have a very, very great concern about the lack of social housing in the area, and about the lack of places for people to live when they reach retirement and they wish to stay within Rushcliffe, or they wish to stay in the area in which they live. And so from that point of view, I completely agree with what Councillor Plant said, which was that we really need developments like this to provide accommodation for older people. I also am thinking that if I look around the committee, I don't want to cast aspersions, but I imagine that most of them are well over 55. And frankly, I'm one of those people, and I would not dream of moving to a place like this until I had to. So, and I certainly, all my friends of a similar age would agree with that. So I think it is probably right. We've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence tonight, and then one of those is that the likelihood is that people would be more likely to be older people, and I think that is probably correct. However, it says on Google Maps it's 4 minutes to the bus stop. That is for the number 7 or 8. The last bus into the city is at 22:39, but coming back, the last book from the city is 1945. So I hope none of those elderly people want to go to the theatre or the cinema or anything. You could walk further and catch a Keyworth bus. So therefore, I was wondering if we did decide to permit this application, whether we could have a condition if the residents are likely to be very elderly, and then could a condition be made so that better infrastructure for those people is provided in the form of perhaps a small bus. My mother, when she was in her late 80s, she lived in her own house at the time, but there was a local company that ran a little minibus around collecting older people and taking them to places. So that sort of thing could be surely provided by the applicant, I would have thought. Yeah, I think, you know, over 55s, I do think it's unlikely that people would be moving into this kind of place. Retirement is not at the moment statutory retirement is not until 66. Soon it will be 67. So most people who are over 55 are still working. I certainly am. So, you know, I think it's unlikely that there will be a lot of 55-year-olds moving into there. I know this is not quite what you want to hear, but 2 weeks ago we passed 170 flats built by Forest with evidence provided for them by them with 67 car parking spaces in a place where buses cannot get down a street because of the excessive parking. So I'll just remind you of that. So there are parts of West Bridgford which are certainly, I'm not saying, you know, it's everyone should be the same, certainly not. I think there should be room for everyone, but you know, it is a common problem in West Bridgford that particularly with older houses, that there's not enough parking for people who have one large car or several large cars, and the size of cars has gone up by 40%. A suggestion could be, and this is a suggestion I made at that meeting, was that you could have a development where you say to the people that live there, if you want to live here, you don't have a car of your own unless you have an adapted vehicle. If you and then they provide pool cars, and then you could borrow loan out a car. You could even borrow a van or something. You could have a selection of cars. You could have a small amount of pool cars that people would be guaranteed to be able to use when they lived on the site. So that's another possible condition that I have suggested many times before, and it certainly does take place in other countries in Europe and in London. So there's a lot of that sort of thing where you don't have a car if you live in this development, but you have access to pool cars and other vehicles, unless you need an adapted vehicle, in which case, obviously, you would need that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen, and then go to Mr. Councillor Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. So just picking up on the two sort of conditions that you mentioned there, I think I'll just remind members that the conditions need to meet the 6 tests, I think, which I've sort of mentioned before in terms of being necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development, enforceable, precise and reasonable in all other aspects. I think I'd probably just err on the side of caution for the 2 conditions that have just been mentioned, and whether they do meet the tests. But again, that's something that members can consider as part of their debate assessment. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot to say, it is correct, isn't it? I have been on planning for 20 years, and that shows how old I am. And if the Highways Authority say that something is acceptable, it is very difficult for us to refuse planning permission on highways ground. It is likely that there will be an appeal that we will lose in that circumstance. Is that correct?
Effectively, it's difficult to say because it depends on the nature of the case, etc. But yes, without these sort of support from the Highways Authority, in terms of sort of looking towards maybe a reason for refusal on the highway safety grounds, there isn't that support from the Highways Authority because they've raised no objection to the scheme. So yeah, that is something that members just need to be mindful of as well.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to move deferment, but if Rachel is absolutely adamant that that is not an option, the only alternative is for me to propose that we refuse the application.
On bases.
On the basis that there is insufficient parking and the child safety aspects which have been brought up before.
Councillor Birch.
Thank you. Can I just get a bit of clarity because we're coming to the crunch here? You mentioned the fallback position. So can I just understand that fully, please? So they've got planning permission, the thing's being built. Hypothetically, if this gets rejected, their fallback position is they have to carry on as is written and as the application has been accepted previously. Are they then in breach? Well, the reasons they've given for changing this is that Notts County Council pulled the plug on the funding, if you like, to put it in layman's terms. And first of all, have we got any evidence for that? Are we just taking the applicant's word for that? Has there been any documentation to say that or anything like that? And could you explain a bit more about the fallback position, please?
So as ever, we've got to assess the application based on what the applicant submits. So if they want to submit the application as they have done, then we've got to consider that and assess that. In terms of justification, why they've submitted that doesn't necessarily come into it as per se. It would just be a case of, is this development acceptable or not? And in terms of the fallback position, I might hand over to Mr. Langton just to pick up on what they do.
So as you state, they've got planning permission for the 77 apartment extra care facility. In planning terms, they can continue to develop that. They can build that out. They can stop building if it doesn't work for them. That's entirely up to the applicant whether or not they can run it based on what has been stated in respect of funding and support from the county council. We are not involved in that aspect of things. That is between them and the county council. If it turns out that they can't continue to run it, there is nothing stopping them in planning terms from developing the building and then the building potentially sitting vacant or sitting in an unfinished state should they not be able to proceed with that. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Okay, and I've got one final thing, and it's been mooted that if it did get built without adequate planning, without adequate parking, then there'll be a sort of natural selection, Darwinian sort of effect where people who needed cars wouldn't choose to live there. Is there any data underpinning that? It's an interesting idea, but is there any proof of that? I mean, from my mind is that this is for over 55s. It's likely that the average age is going to be higher, but we don't know that. And we have to plan for the worst case scenario, because if a bunch of younger people move in who do have cars, then we've got a very difficult situation, whether it's now or in 20 years time. We've got no capacity and we've got a nightmarish situation on our hands. That's what I'm concerned about. So if you could answer that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's essentially what's before the committee for yourselves to decide is, we've reported within the report there is an under provision of parking that is noted. I think the consideration is for the planning committee as to whether or not that results in an unacceptable form of development when it's weighed up against the benefits of the scheme in terms of the 100% affordable housing provision, biodiversity net gain that would be provided, and bringing forward a development with those benefits as we've stated before on applications. That's got to be weighed up against each other to consider on whether or not you find the application to be acceptable.
I recognise that councillor Ellis has made a proposal, but before I ask whether that's has support by way of a second, I'm conscious that we've spent our time on one issue. That might be the only issue that we want to discuss, but I would just invite ask if there are any other comments on any other material planning considerations before we get towards making a decision. Councillor Calvert.
Just to say that we've covered two issues. We also covered affordable housing and the dire shortage of affordable housing within the borough.
Okay. We did, and I'll consider my wrist slapped, and you're right. You're of course right, Councillor Calvert. So, Councillor Matthews.
Just similar to Councillor Calvert, I believe Councillor Mason and a few others mentioned the lack of other facilities and amenities, and Councillor Plant did as well, within the area. So there are other considerations as well as just parking that were mentioned by other councillors.
Sorry, to be clear, what I was saying was, does anybody else want to make any other comments with respect to the planning application that haven't been raised so far? Okay. Okay, Councillor Birch, please.
Yeah, I second Councillor Ellis's motion.
Okay, so we just need the material planning considerations, which will be form the grounds of refusal for reversing the officer recommendation to approve. There's car parking.
The first one is the insufficient parking provision. The second one is the child safety aspects, which were mentioned earlier. Whether your comment can be used to support that, I don't know.
Well, I don't think so, because my comment was that if you increase the amount of car parking, it will increase the amount of traffic within the area, which could lead to increased road safety issues.
And the other one was the general lack of facilities within that particular area, which would necessitate the use of car travel to get to essential services. Councillor Plant mentioned doctors, dentists, supermarkets, and I'm sure there are others.
Thank you. So on the second point, the site is considered to be in what we would consider as a sustainable location. So in terms of sort of the concerns that have been raised, I would probably recommend looking more towards sort of the impacts upon sort of displacement parking. So in terms of sort of maybe there being sort of insufficient parking within the development, which then leads, I think this is what Councillor Calvert mentioned, in terms of sort of leads to on-street parking in the vicinity elsewhere. One question I had, I suppose, would be whether you consider the application has failed to demonstrate that it would be satisfactory, or whether you think it isn't satisfactory. If I can, yeah.
I didn't quite understand that point.
So what I understood it to be is there's a bar which might be you fail to demonstrate that there wouldn't be an acceptable impact on parking in the road network, or you believe there would be an acceptable level. So it's, I think, failure to demonstrate is perhaps, you might say, a lower, a lower evidential bar to cross than that you're happy that there definitely would be.
Sorry, Chair. I think it's a fairly logical conclusion that if the committee accepts that there is under provision of parking, and as Councillor Wells said, we're talking about residents parking, but what about visitors, care workers, all the rest of it? it's a logical conclusion that there will be extra pressure on street parking, I think.
Thank you, Chair. So sorry, just to make sure we're sort of going along the right, sort of got the same thought pattern. So would you be comfortable with something along the lines of it's not been demonstrated, and this goes back to sort of the evidence and sort of the data that you've sort of discussed this evening quite a lot in terms of, so it's not been demonstrated to the satisfaction of the LPO, Local Planning Authority, that the proposed development would not result in displaced parking, and that's the sort of because it's around the vicinity of the development, and that results in on-street parking in the area, which may result in potential access issues, access safety issues. Okay.
Okay, very good. So we have we have that moved by Councillor Ellis and seconded by Councillor Birch. So I now ask for all those in favour to indicate now. Five, yeah. Got. And all of those against, please. And abstention. Abstention. So that vote's fallen, hasn't it? Because I voted.
Okay, with the abstention, there were 5 votes in favour of the motion to refuse planning permission, moved by Councillor Ellis, and there are 5 against. So now, in those circumstances, Mr. Chairman, you have a casting vote. I think we would have to revert, because we just need a new motion. It was whether we revert to the original motion in the officer's report.
Yeah, that's the position that we're in. So when in light of that, I'm going to propose the recommendation in the report to grant planning permission subject to the conditions therein.
Second that.
Before we move on to the vote, you have the right to be here and to listen to the discussions, but that is fettered by the responsibility not to disrupt or act in a I wouldn't say in a non-respectful manner. So I'll ask everybody to please bear that in mind as we carefully consider this and make the decision that we're going to make, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm that includes the additional condition as part of the late representation and the amended heads of terms document as well?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
So we have a new recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the conditions in the report and late representations. So I'll ask again all of those in favour. And those against, please. Okay, so on the, any abstentions? Thank you.
So it's a chair's casting vote.
5-5, and the no. So on that basis, planning permission is to be granted subject to the conditions in the report and late representations. Appreciate there'll be some people leaving at this stage, so we'll adjourn for 5 minutes whilst people have the opportunity to do that. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that break. Just call everybody back to relative order, please. As we move on to the second planning application for our consideration this evening, which relates to land to the north of Main Street, Sutton cum Granby. And at this point, I'll hand over to Mr. Elliott to take us through the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just a correction within the report. If I can draw members' attention to paragraph 50, page 42, in relation to an inspector's decision, the wrong reference number is put in there, and the report states 20-03272. It should be a 21 reference number and 21/02426 FUL. So just a typo there. This is the application site, and just close to the northern edge of Sutton cum Granby. And an aerial shot of the site just to show the full extent. And this is just a zoomed in version, so we can see the street view. I'll just draw members' attention to a few features. These are the 3 new dwellings on this side of the road here. And then Willow Cottage and Brunkett Cottage close to the boundary of the site here. Highfield House, which is a listed building, and then the barn conversions on this side. A couple of photos just to orientate you around the site. This is the field, the current field access into the application site, and Willow Cottage just here. The hedgerow that's running along Main Street forms the front boundary of the site, and then you can just see the garage of one of the new builds on here. Highfield House in the background. Same position, just a little bit closer, the existing field access here, and that's Willow Cottage and its driveway. And then a bit closer in, so you can see the full extent of the site here, and you can see the levels gently fall down to the rear boundary, which is marked by that hedgerow just there. Then further into the site, this is the boundary of Willow Cottage, and then this is the other side of the site here. And then just from another angle, this is the boundary with Willow Cottage. Now looking in the western direction, so you can see the same field access, and this is the boundary, front boundary. And just a little bit further back with these new builds on the right-hand side. So the application is a hybrid application, which means it's come forward with an outline with all matters reserved for the residential development, except for access and layout. The residential development will come forward in a pair of 70 detatches, with the parking that runs parallel with the road, and a new significant access point, which would form a junction here into the private drive, and then follow through into the other element of the application, which is a change of use of the agricultural field into a community meadow. Same plan, just zoomed in, and we can see that a new access point and parking area would be formed for Willow Cottage, as the new access point would interfere with the current access point for Willow Cottage. So that's to benefit them. And then this is the full extent of the site. So we can see the residential development at the top there. And then this would be a new car parking space for the community meadow. And you would have allotments in orchards, and then an informal meadow area leading all the way down to a pond area. This is the same plan, but I just zoomed in just to give better clarity. So you've got the residential development at the front there, orchard area, allotments, and then orchards again, with this parking area here to serve that community use. So in terms of the actual application and an officer's view, in terms of the principle of development, the site is located within the open countryside. It would not constitute infill development, as the site is not located within the gap within the existing built fabric of the settlement, and it's not on previously developed lands. As such, the principle of residential development is not supported and is contrary to local plan policies. Furthermore, the inclusion and creation of a new access point, parking areas, and removal of the section of a hedgerow to form the access is considered to result in a significant adverse impact on the rural character of the area. In terms of technical matters, There were highway concerns raised by the Highway Authority initially. This was overcome when a speed survey became available and there's more information. However, a condition that's been put forward by the Highway Authority to overcome their concerns is fairly onerous. It asks for all events to be prior approved before they can go ahead in terms of highway safety grounds. It's only on that basis that the Highway Authority has removed its objection. There are several benefits to the scheme which are widely acknowledged in terms of the provision of the community meadow. There's significant on-site B&G gain, there would be allotments, and there's strong local support from the parish and the ward member, as well as local residents, all of which are acknowledged by officers and weigh in favour of the scheme. However, because of the highway related condition that I mentioned previously, in terms of the events that could be held, that would be of a limited benefit. Overall, while these benefits are acknowledged, they are not considered to outweigh the strong objection in principle to residential development and the further harm to the rural character to the open countryside that would result from the creation of the residential dwellings, the significant access point, the driveways and the parking areas. As such, the application comes forward with a recommendation for refusal, with the reasons for refusal detailed on pages 48 to 49 of the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And we have 3 speakers registered, but in line with the rules, 2 of those speakers are going to share the slot, effectively speaking in favour of the application. So I'd invite Mr. Cooper first, please. And when you're, I think you've seen the people before, you know the drill. When you're ready, press the button onto the right hand side of the phone. The light will come on, and then on the basis that you're, I think, splitting it half-half, so 2.5 minutes. My colleague Ms. Clack will let you know when there's 30 seconds of those 2.5 minutes left. Thank you.
Good evening. A fair assessment of this application has been undertaken on its individual elements, not the whole package as it was presented. The report concludes that this application does not fit neatly into policy boxes, and this is correct. I'm asking you tonight to weigh up the planning balance offered by this scheme. The MPPF asks authorities to respond proactively and creatively in terms of sustainable development, ensuring economic, social and environmental objectives. Economic. This application proposes the gift of land to the parish council, serviced allotment site, access road, parking and a pond formation. It's estimated that this has the value of over £150,000. An economic solution to the parish council's long-standing search for allotment sites. Social. We're all aware of the drive to provide more affordable housing. This scheme provides homes for discounted market private rent, and I can confirm that this will be secured by a Section 106 agreement. This proposal is far more than a rural exception site. Affordable housing supporting the provision of community facilities. Surely this ticks the social objective. Environmental. We do remove an 8-metre section of roadside hedge to provide access, but take a look at the plan. This is not a motorway intersection. It's a highways compliant access to 4 homes with a section of footpath and a drive serving the allotments. The report doesn't mention that the combined site has a total biodiversity net gain potential of 184%. You'll well know that the statutory target is 10%. This is a massive environmental gain, not a problem for landscape character. The parish council will explain more about the activities and potential uses of the community area. Any activities held here will be more than adequately served by the proposed 18 car parking spaces attached to the allotments. Concerns raised on additional traffic are unfounded and easily resolvable. The application brings forward a community-led proposal serving the area's needs. It complies with economic, social and environmental objectives of planning policy. I'm asking you to listen to the community and draw a more positive conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Fuel next, please. So, no, take your time. That in front of you on the thing there, there's a button to the right hand. There's one on the left, one on the right. It's the one on the right that you need. It'll go red. And when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm Trevor Fuel. I'm the chair of Granby Sutton Parish Council. For clarity, the parish comprises both the village of Granby and the hamlet of Sutton, as a combined population of 450. I mention it because there was an error in the documentation. So it's not a huge parish, it's an active one, it's a dynamic one all the same. As a parish council, we understand our community and we know its needs and wishes of that community extremely well. And the application before you reflects these, namely a community space, a wildlife area, allotments, and although not in our direct remit, affordable housing. Those needs were the core of a discussion that started 2 years ago with Mr. Roberts behind me about a possible hybrid project whereby we could gain all of those things. The project only became possible when Mr. Roberts generously, very, very generously offered to gift us 7.5 acres of site to the parish council in memory of his father, who in turn had been a pillar of Sutton society for many decades. 2 years of effort have gone into the project since then. I know you want to hear about consultation and engagement, so a parish meeting was called. We put the proposal to the community, 60 residents attended, nothing short of miraculous, and there was no single opposition voiced. A community needs survey was looked at the need for affordable housing. We received 90 responses with over 60% positive, whilst regarding the allotments, we already have some 30 expressions of interest, and we have a proto committee. The support of the community, organisations, individuals in the creation and use of the nature reserve has been absolutely outstanding. 2 minutes mentioned, but I would mention the Nottingham Wildlife Trust, NCC's own team of People and Forest Initiative, and your very own senior ecological officer. The parish and community see this as a unique and unrepeatable chance to really make a difference to the community, its neighbours, individuals, their lives, nature, the environment, now and for generations to come. And we just hope that you will allow us to make that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Councillor Grocott, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to address the committee on the principle of the development on this site, specifically the conclusions drawn in point 47 of the report, which states that the site would not be considered to form land within the built-up fabric of the village, with the site having a clearly more established relationship with the surrounding agricultural field system and land uses than the established settlement form. I disagree with the stark conclusion this draws and think a more nuanced interpretation is possible. Firstly, the site is surrounded on the north, west and south by housing within the settlement. The location plan supplied alongside the report is inaccurate as it does not show the development of land on the other side of the road. The photos did, but the plan didn't, immediately to the west of the site. This development, 1901-4204, as mentioned in the report, has connected Highfield House and the other dwellings and structures at the northern end of the village with the main body of the settlement, thus extending the settlement boundary to the north on the western side of the road. This means that the proposed site of this application is surrounded by the settlement to the front, to the southwestern side and to the northern and southern corners of where the affordable housing will be built. Development of this site would then partially extend development northwards on the eastern side of the road, matching that on the west, as is the case throughout the rest of the village, with development evenly set out on both sides of the road. The location plan shows the entire proposed site, including the community space, but the housing element would only sit along the road frontage and not be significantly set back or extending out into the open countryside. This would be in keeping with the pattern of road frontage and moderately set back residential dwellings found within Sutton's linear pattern development. Secondly, Policy 11, Development of Non-Designated Sites, states the local plan does not identify the settlement boundaries within which the policy will apply. This means that the definition of the built-up area of settlements like Sutton is not set in stone and that the policy allows for interpretation on a case-by-case basis of where the settlement boundary is. The construction of the 3 large dwellings approved for development in 1901-4204, which has occurred after the last appeal refusal in 2023 has materially changed the settlement boundary of Sutton, pushing it northwards, which merits a reconsideration of the site's location as to whether it is within the built-up area of the village. Thirdly, the development patterns in Sutton, and indeed across my ward, show a wide variation based on ribbon and infill development across historic farms, churches, railway lines, inns, and other traditional rural usages. The definitions of what is within and without a village is highly subjective and based on historic patterns of extremely low density development. A dwelling or cluster of dwellings may be several small infill gaps away from their nearest neighbour, but that does not mean they are not within the built-up area of the village. Sutton lies on a road on a ridge that connects Granby, Sutton, Elton on the Hill and Austin. If you look on a map, you will see that both on the edges of villages and between them, there are numerous individual and clusters of buildings generally of residential use dotted along it. Whilst I would never argue that these villages aren't distinct settlements, I would equally never state that this road that connects them together is populated by purely agricultural fields. For example, Otter Cottage, a residential dwelling, is found on the same eastern side of the road as Main Street, Sutton Lane, 100 metres or so to the north of the proposed site. Thus, the character on the main road linking these settlements is a blend of low-density residential development and agricultural usage that bleed into each other and in many cases don't have a clear and obvious curtilage or boundary. Within this context, the development of this site would do minimal harm, as it is arguably much more within the settlement of Sutton than many other residential sites in the area that are further set back or less connected to the host village to which they belong. For example, from a recent appeal decision in favour of the appellant on a site in nearby Elton, which I would argue was much further away from the main body of the built-up area of that village, stated, while development here is more dispersed and lower in density, the existing buildings nevertheless form a loose cluster, part of the built fabric of the village. The addition of a further single dwelling would respect the pattern of development within the village. Now, as much as it's nice as a ward councillor to be almost directly quoted word for word by a planning inspector, the reason I also think the same principle applies in this case is the recent increase in residential usage surrounding the site created by the development on the opposite side of the road. The new interpretation of the village boundary this entails. The location of this site in this new context being surrounded by housing on just over 50% of its boundary, and how that is considered within wider patterns of lower density and dispersed residential development in the surrounding area. In summary, the policy itself is purposefully vague to allow a level of fluidity in its interpretation, which means that it is perfectly reasonable on balance to interpret that this site represents infill development, or at least that the planning balance on the principle of development is very nuanced, very close and open to interpretation. Therefore, when weighted alongside the community and environmental benefits outlined this evening, any harm to the rural character of Sutton that this development may cause is at worst extremely minimal and significantly outweighed by the development of affordable housing and dedicated community allotments, green space and wildlife areas.